Hello, welcome back to the InsTech podcast. Zoya here, and this week Matthew sits down with Garret Gray of Cotality, formerly known as CoreLogic, for a conversation that's both deeply personal and sharply relevant to the future of insurance. After escaping a wildfire with his family earlier this year, Garret shares what it's like to be a policyholder in crisis and how that experience is fueling his mission to modernize the claims process, data strategy, and the use of AI in insurance. So why are we still waiting weeks or months to settle claims that could be resolved in minutes? And what will it take for insurers to actually unlock the power of their own data? If you're working in claims, underwriting, innovation, or catastrophe modeling, grab a cup of tea or coffee. This one's for you. Now let's jump into the episode.
I'm really delighted to have you joining us today. I've been really intrigued on what's been going on with CoreLogic, or now Cotality. We'll talk a bit about that, but just a bit of who you are. You're actually normally based out in California. I know you're traveling today, but great to have you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you founded Next Gear Solutions. Your CEO founder, that was bought by what was then CoreLogic in 2021. You're now president of Cotality's global insurance business unit. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but we're going to be switching Cotality, CoreLogic. Can we just kick off with just, you changed the name earlier this year, you announced it at your conference. Perhaps we just have a quick check-in about why CoreLogic, why has it now become Cotality?
Yeah, really, it's a reflection of a huge cultural change and kind of company mix change that's happened over the last 4 years. Frankly, when I was acquired by what was then CoreLogic, it's really a different company today than it was back then for lots of really positive reasons. And as the senior management team, which I'm a part of, was reflecting on all the things that we've accomplished and the changes that we've made, we just didn't feel like the CoreLogic names encapsulated us anymore. And we wanted something that had more vitality to it, was more collaborative. It's really just a reflection of the internal transformation that we've been going through over the last 4 years.
I want to come back to my reference to California, and it's always intriguing where sort of personal life intersects with business life and reality. Those of us who've been around for a while, knowing California for the earthquake risk. Most recently, we've seen some other things out there, and you had a very personal story, which you were good enough to share at your conference. It'd be great just to hear a little bit about what happened earlier this year.
Yeah. So January 7th is one of those dates that will kind of live in my memory for a long time. I was actually in my office, which is about 30 minutes away from my house. My kids go to school about half a mile from my house, just down the hill. And I've got 3 boys, 9 and 8. So I've got twins as well. I'm just a normal day. And I get a text from somebody that's at my house that the hills around my house are on fire and that it was pretty bad. And they were trying to figure out what they should do. And my first thought went to, well, I don't really care about my house, but my kids are very close to where the fire is because they're so close to their school's so close to the house. And so I started to become a little panicked around how to get my kids safe. And the school was sending these frantic text messages that said, come get your kids. And I knew I was 30 minutes away and I didn't know how fast the fire was going to travel, but I did know that the winds were moving really fast that morning. So I asked that person to go, grab my kids from school and then bring them to a grocery store that I thought would be completely out of harm's way. And as I got closer, I could start to see the smoke billowing in front of me. I could see how big it was. Really kind of started to increase my anxiety as the traffic got tighter and tighter as I got closer, because essentially there was all this gridlock happening where people were trying to get out of the area or get in to get kids. It was kind of mayhem. I was talking to the person who had my kids, and I could hear my kids in the background kind of frantically saying things like, Daddy, we can see the flames. This is, very scary. It got to the point where I said, you know what, just abandon your car in the parking lot and run down the hill, and I'll run up the hill. And I did. I ran up the hill into the smoke, met them, got them, brought them back down to where I parked my car on the primary street. And then we kind of made a 2-hour trek out of the area to get out of harm's way. But if any of your listeners followed what happened, there was an area where cars were abandoned and people ran. That was the same area.
It's something extraordinary. I mean, I suppose you've all seen the disaster movie, and the news, so we can visualize it. I'm just so pleased everyone was safe. And then, as you said, less important, but nonetheless relevant, particularly in the context of what Cotality does. Your house got badly damaged. It wasn't burned down, but I don't think you've been back there yet, have you?
Yeah. So for the first time now, I'm a policyholder. Well, I've been a policyholder, but I'm filing a claim. So this is the first time I've been on this side of that kind of process. And yeah, we're lucky because we had actual real admitted insurance. We weren't on some sort of fair plan or anything like that. We have good proper insurance. But, a lot of people think, oh, your house didn't burn down. That's amazing. And that makes life so much easier. And in some ways, it is because all my kids, little artifacts when they grew up, like their hair from their first haircut and all the artwork they've done, all the stuff that you can't replace is now still intact, which is amazing. The hard part is there's this hidden damage that all these houses that are still standing, which is essentially the smoke and soot was pushed through every crevice in the house. And a house like mine had so many different windows and doors. And each one of those, you walk in and there's this almost inch pile high of soot and ash that just kind of is brushing all the way into the house. And then other things, like we actually had the electricity come back really fast. And so that was actually a bad thing because it turned the air conditioner back on and then circulated all that soot throughout the house for a couple weeks before we could even get back to the property. So if you think about it, it's these houses that are standing. And to be honest, my house is probably a little bit better off than some others because we were at the beginning of the fire. And so most of the smoke and ash that was coming from vegetation. But we have friends that have houses more in the center that did survive, but they have things like lead and asbestos and all sorts of toxins being found in testing at their house. So these houses that are still standing are still not inhabitable. They still are going to take a tremendous amount of dollars to clean, and it's just going to take a lot of time. And so there's really no time frame for when we'll be back in our house.
And then the whole neighborhood also, I think you said the grocery store itself is no longer there. So I guess you're able to support you. There's not much to go back to, even if your house is okay.
Yes, the whole community has been devastated. There's really no infrastructure to speak of. And so it's going to take a while to get that community back up and running.
And just if we sort of talk about what the lessons of that mean for you personally, I actually went out to the Northridge earthquake, coincidentally, when I was working for EQE, which was kind of ultimately ended up within Cotality. But I think that struck me is a little bit like your air conditioning going on is after the earthquake, it was the sprinklers coming on that caused all the damage. Well, not all the damage because the buildings got damaged, but it's just that recognition that you get these secondary effects that people forget about sometimes that can actually have even worse impact, and then all the business interruption coming in as well. Clearly, that made a big impact on you for lots of reasons. When you opened up your conference, you mentioned that limits are lies, and it just seems like there's a connection between what you said there and your recent experience as a policyholder and running a business looking at risk mitigation.
Yeah, I mean, our focus was trying to get people to shift their perspective and think through new paradigms, because a lot of the limits that we're all imposing on ourselves in our personal lives and our professional lives, but just even in the industry, things that we've always done things the same way, but are frankly sometimes not working. And that's reflected in loss ratios and just the amount of time that it takes to process a claim and a lot of the manual effort. And we've got a retiring and aging workforce in the adjuster space, for example, in the States. And I'm not going to name my carrier because I'm very grateful to them and I'm happy with everything they're doing. But, I'm on my 7th adjuster for this claim. Every couple of weeks, I get a new adjuster. And I think, it could be a whole host of reasons. But the point is that there's a lot of things there's a lot of opportunity, raise the experience for the policyholder, help bring loss ratios back into control, and to really just remove the friction through the supply chain of how these claims get handled after there is one.
Maybe a slightly provocative question, but I mean, I've been talking to people for at least 5 years, probably longer, who've been offering digital solutions to claims using phones to look at loss. Why do you think that hasn't moved faster? I mean, the technology's been available for quite some time now.
There's different levels of the technology have been available. This is a path that started 10, 15 years ago, but COVID itself really caused a big acceleration in a lot of this tech. So I actually think our industry is starting to move and is moving faster than we've ever seen it move. But it's also a risk-averse industry, and some of these tools are still nascent. They're technologies that are kind of new and really exciting, but aren't always accurate enough or have not traditionally been accurate enough. I think that's changing. And one of the products that we're releasing here just allows people to walk through the house, both, scans and measures, listens to the technician as they're talking, uses damage detection models to identifying and building the scope based on what's being said and what the computer is seeing. That's really promising and has been pretty successfully used in our beta testing. I think this is going to get easier and easier. And well, that's our intention at Cotality, to make it easier and easier. And we're not the only ones.
So that point about the adjusters aging, historically they have to go out on site. There's a way you're doing that. Are you kind of moving straight to fully AI, or is there an interim step where you've got an adjuster that can now look at something remotely? So you've got the ability to get the tech, but you're creating more efficiency because your adjuster, you still got the kind of human in the loop, to your point about trust and accuracy, but there's different steps along the way.
Our perspective on how AI is going to impact our space isn't that it's necessarily going to replace a bunch of jobs. It's more that it's going to make people smarter and faster, and give more flexibility to carriers to decide how they adjudicate claims. So, for example, if there's a water mitigation tech out on site that the carrier sent to address the water intrusion on a claim, they don't necessarily need to send an adjuster because they've got a trusted professional that can do all the documentation that they know is actually done properly, because it's not subjugated to what the tech is measuring. It's actually being measured through LiDAR, et cetera. And so they can have more confidence in the technology and the measurements, and that there's really not much material difference between if they would have sent an adjuster out. That gives the option to say, hey, I don't need to send a field adjuster out to certain claims. Giving those carriers more flexibility, giving them more technology is one thing, but it's also about just speeding up the process and the back and forth. In my particular claim right now, this particular carrier is not using our tools, and the review of the estimate before the work can get done has gone on for months. And that's something that really that could be done with technology in 30 seconds. And for some carriers, they are doing that. We have some carriers that 80% of their files are just straight through processed and move fast. So all these things come with costs to the carriers. They come with poor policyholder experience, and it can be addressed through technology even today.
Even more so, I suppose, with a hurricane or flood, where there's a delay in the remedial measures, and you have more decay and more problems the longer it takes to actually get the building reinstated. So it's not just a efficiency cost, but it's also, you're just, as you implied, you're just getting there faster.
Yeah, and that will be true with my house, for example, because think about that. Soot has been sitting there now for 6 months.
Yeah.
And soot is acidic. And so it is potentially edging glass. We don't know what we'll find, in terms of supplements when they get in to do the actual work.
Right. And then what about on the front end? So the underwriting side, one of the other comments you've made, which no surprise to anybody really, we've got more data than we ever dreamed of, but now what do we do with it? How do you think about sort of trying to navigate that? And I guess, partly from your own experience, from an underwriting perspective, what are you seeing as you think about how you develop the company in terms of how to make use of data effectively, efficiently, and just practically from an underwriting perspective?
It comes down to granular, high fidelity property characteristics, and knowing why did some houses, for example, not burn in this last event, or if there was an earthquake, which types of construction are going to fare better. All this stuff is, impacted by building codes, which are changing in many places like Florida. And we're seeing that effect when these building codes go into place years later, because it takes a long time to move through. You see those properties that are up to code fare better in the aftermath. And so it's a combination, to address this from a kind of underwriting perspective of getting, different DOIs to allow certain models that they have traditionally not allowed, to allow carriers to get the rate they need and really understand and price the risk. It also requires local governments changing their building codes and learning from these events so that we have more sustainable and properties that can survive these sort of events and don't add to it. If you think about it, in the Palisades, we went from a wildfire in the wildlands to a wildfire in the city, and that whole process of conflagration spread the fire really fast from property to property. If there was more defensible space, if there was better roofing materials and less houses burned in the front end, you may not have had that fire spread so rapidly. And so, how we build back in Palisades is important if we want to have a resilient, kind of fire safe community. And so all of this is going to be necessary to help carriers get a better handle on risk and to really make sure that consumers and property owners have access to insurance, which is the biggest concern for me as somebody who lives in California. Just getting access to insurance. I was lucky to have it, but in 6 months from now, I probably have to figure out what to do with insurance because there's a likelihood that my carrier won't want to keep me. So who's going to write it? These are all really challenging questions that are going to take a lot of people collaborating together to tackle.
Yeah, and then just for those who don't speak insurance or US insurance, DOI is Department of Insurance, and I mean, I think specifically, well, I know specifically Wildfire was one of the models that the Insurance Commission was looking at, to sort of question whether models can be used to rate. And I think that one is now starting to be resolved. I hope they don't make the same mistake they made in Palisades, they made in London back after the fire of London in the 17th century, when the idea was to build a sort of nice wide streets and make everything nice and safe. And they took so long trying to get themselves organized, it was built back on the old street plan. So although the buildings are all newer, we've still got the same fire problem. And to what extent does data help insurance companies either encourage mitigation or reduce the premiums of people? As you said, they've got defensible space, sprinklers, all the other things that can reduce the loss.
The California Department of Insurance actually requires now, there's like 12 mitigation factors that have to affect the rate. So there's a public education component to this. I'll tell you a quick anecdote. Like, I met with somebody I know who is one of these Hollywood elite, and he was managing his whole neighborhood, and they were trying to get together to decide how can we become more fire resilient. And I was telling him what it would take. And he's like, oh, no one's going to do that. No one's going to change the vegetation around their house. Like, everyone wants to have the hedges and the privacy and the trees on the property. And I was like, yeah, so if you're not willing to do it, then you're going to stay in the same fire risk that you have today. And so, yeah, there are things that people are willing to do, like change out vents and put sprinklers in and a whole host of things that maybe don't have a material effect on the look of the property. I think there's an education factor of getting people to be comfortable differently landscaping their properties so that there's more defensible space.
Fire retardant vegetation, that's what someone needs to invent. So yeah,
that's right.
Turning to what you've been doing since you took on the role with Cotality, what are some of the success stories for you in terms of how you've started to shape the business strategy going forward?
I came from a small startup that had a lot of constraints on our resources, and we had lots of big dreams and not the resources to go after them. And so 4 years ago, get acquired by this company that had all these other resources, not just in insurance, which there were many. And Equicat is one you mentioned. And we had our estimating practice, which was known as Symbility. Then we had a really healthy underwriting business in the States. So lots of assets there. But on top of that, we're really a property company. So because we have so much influence in the mortgage space and the real estate space, we have a ton of data that we've been able to start to bring into the insurance part of our business. And more than just the data, there's been a ton of enterprise level work done to make us more AI ready. We've moved everything to the cloud, so we are able to operate more nimbly. We have a ton of AI initiatives, both internally and for our customers to make us more efficient and better able to serve our customers, and also to make our customers more efficient and able to serve their customers. So I think, one of the things that I brought to this role is kind of probably a higher degree of focus on AI for the insurance space, and really pulling in the really good work that was done for the real estate sector and others, and making it available to our insurance community. And that was well timed because now we were doing that before it kind of hit everyone's consciousness. And now it's a big topic. Everyone wants to know how we're addressing it.
I was at your conference, I think it was the one 2 years ago, you were actually creating part of your presentation with AI, I think even with AI. And then you had a wonderful ironically, actually, careful what you do. I think you created a burning and flooded building out of AI as well. So yeah,
That's
I mean,
right.
you definitely were doing that. One of the ones I came across was something called Conversations with Your Data. Is that one of the products you were talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a couple. So Conversations with Your Data, all of our insurance professionals have to really consume and synthesize and decide, plans of action based on a bunch of data. And so traditionally people have reports and spreadsheets and dashboards and pie charts and all sorts of graphs. And all that's super helpful, but the ability to just talk with your data and ask questions and get really thoughtful responses. Just think about, anyone who's played with ChatGPT today, and you can ask it, about almost anything that's happening in the world or that has happened, and get a really thoughtful response and relate it to other things and kind of ask it to draw correlations. But being able to do that with your own business data. And that is a really key focus for us to make that an easier way for people to engage with their really meaningful data.
And so on that, I mean, lots of people see the value out of it. The challenge often seems to be, how do you actually extract insights from that data? Because it's messy, it's not formatted, it's different standards. I'm assuming that's part of what you've got to solve as well. Is you can't demand perfection in how the data's been formatted in order to be able to make it usable for people, because it's not going to happen.
No, I mean, there's work that we have had to do and will continue to do to make our data AI ready. But because people are living in our ecosystem, that really creates a bunch of structured data that will be naturally AI ready. So yes, is there unstructured data like going through notes and narratives? But AI is actually really good at taking that unstructured data and doing something with it. So I don't think that's as big of an issue. I think the question for people to consider when they're choosing partners is, who is thinking about, as I'm using their workflow tools, giving me AI insights because they're formatting the data in the back end to do that for me. And then who has supplemental data they can bring to bear into my environment, especially around the property, that can also be used to give me better insights.
And then we touched on this a little bit, but just coming back to one of the work areas, which is catastrophe modeling. CoreLogic, as it was, a few of the other companies, when you went through the different branding before with the catastrophe modeling you acquired, was well known for some of the models. You've got some really strong people in there. What's happening in that space, and how are you developing that area?
Yeah, what's interesting about our cat risk journey is when I got here, one of the things that I heard from actually people like you was just like, we had this really strong market position. There was obviously two other big leaders ahead of us, but we had an interesting market position, and we did something really interesting. We kept investing, for years, we kept investing heavily in the science. And partly that was because we were also using that same science to create hazard models, both for US underwriting and for the mortgage industry, et cetera. So there was a reason for us to do the science, but we kept investing in the science of our cat models. And we sort of like shrank away from the market, and we weren't very visible. And we kind of sent the signal that we weren't focused on it. And the odd thing was we were focused on the product part of it. We just weren't focused on, making sure we were communicating with our customers. And so it's been a big passion of mine, actually, personally. And, I've actually really enjoyed conversations with you and others around this topic, because it's a lot for me to learn. It's a whole, new, very big and complicated space, but it's a big area of investment focus for us. We've brought on some really key players, former leaders at places like RMS and Moody's, and we've made some key talent acquisition and product investment. And now it's time for us to start making investment in our go-to-market and making sure that we're at the right, conversations so that people understand the options that they have.
Garret, if I can find it, I will send you the order form for the first UK, what was an EquiCat windstorm model back in 1992, £500. So for the first catastrophe model. So I think you're charging a bit more than that these days, but
maybe. I hope so.
And then you also, I think you're doing something with US earthquake as well, aren't you?
I think in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be able to say that every single peril model has been updated to the most recent science. And that is true for our earthquake model. And so, we've really focused on that. You're right.
And then on the wildfire, there are so many organizations now starting to develop sort of boutique models, bespoke models, different areas of the world. It's just great to see all these companies flourishing. But of course, there's really still a critical role for sort of organizations like yourselves. But I know that for the wildfire ones, you felt there were some gaps in the model. You can talk about what you're doing with your own wildfire model.
Well, after seeing Lahaina and that wildfire there that essentially went from the wildland to urban conflagration, and then seeing it happen just a few years later again in the Palisades, we had been on a journey since Lahaina to update our models and to take account for conflagration. And we released that for California already, and we're releasing other Western states here, kind of in order of priority. And so lots of, changes in terms of looking at how the kind of density of an area and its proximity to the wildlands would affect the risk. So a lot of updates, especially in California. One of the other things that we've done is we've secured a long-term agreement to have access to essentially all aerial imagery, not just in the United States, but actually globally, which is allowing us to really think about how we can use aerial imagery to assess the fire risk of different locations in a new way.
And then the partnership there, is that with Vexel? I don't know if you can.
That's right.
And also you're doing something with Google as well. Is that something you can talk about?
We're partnering with lots of different AI providers based on how their models work and what works best for the environment. And Google is one of them that we're really proud to be partnering with, taking some of their Gemini capabilities and bringing it into both the underwriting process and the claims process. So they're a big piece of how we're transforming the space through AI.
And then, guys, we'll sort of switch back a little bit to you now, or your role. So one of the things that's been interesting to following what you've been doing since you joined the company is you mentioned some of the companies that Cotality had acquired. I think quite a lot of the original founders or CEOs, who I imagine in most cases got paid enough to stop and retire, are still working with you. You yourself are still working. What is it? What's the secret? How do you keep them still working with you, for you, and keep them enthused? I'm sure.
It's a good question. I get asked that quite a lot. So in Next Gear days, we acquired 5 different companies in about 3 years. And CoreLogic has acquired a bunch of companies, now Cotality. So there's lots of different acquisitions that come into play. And, it is surprising that people who, don't necessarily need to work or are, really entrepreneurial in their thinking are still here with this group. I can chalk it up to a few things. One, I think each of these founders are, myself included, really excited about the space. And we feel like a tangible, feeling of we're really going to make a big impact on the space. We're going to change a lot of status quos. We're going to really, I don't want to use the word disrupt because the models are going to be similar, but there's certain competitors have been so entrenched and then, really kind of created a stagnation in terms of innovation. And we've just been on so many different fronts trying to attack that as separate companies. And now we're all together as this kind of bigger group that's a part of another bigger group with a lot more resources. And so I think all these founders are just excited about the impact we're going to be able to make. And I think that the team dynamics and the culture that we have just make it really hard to leave, to be honest. We were excited about the space and we really like working together. So yeah, to be honest, I'm surprised I'm here 4 years later. I think everyone's are surprised. They expected that I would be off, somewhere else, but we've got a lot more work to do.
I think that also that point you made there about you talking about keep growing, keep changing. I mean, one of the things, if I look at companies that get acquired by big organizations, I'm not going to name names on either side, but it does seem like innovation just stops. You have a very innovative team that their entire life revolves around doing their job. They get acquired by a big company. Suddenly they're reporting into different lines and the product just stays static. And because of the sort of momentum, it still keeps going. But I do think that's something that both companies acquiring innovative companies need to figure out. It's not just how do you innovate internally, it's how do you allow those companies to flourish and don't throttle the innovation when they come into a big organization. There's a lot that can be learned from that.
So what I think the answer is there is I think when companies acquire another company, they need to really think about why they're doing it. And if it is all about what the people that are at that company actually built and you're excited about it, and you're excited about its potential, don't have the hubris to think you know how to do it better than they do. And yes, like that group will probably need some professionalization and some scale and some governance and a whole host of things. But if you want to keep that innovation happening, you need to keep those people engaged. You need to give them the latitude to do that. And you need to really take away the hard parts of their job and really free them up to do the really fun, innovative parts of their job. And that's, I think, what Cotality has been really good at doing. Yeah. Accounting stuff, all, a bunch of stuff got, sucked into the center, but the go-to-market and the customer, being close to the customer and the product creation and delivery is still with us. And so we've really been able to, keep that innovation going.
Yeah, that I can sort of speak from experience. I mean, there's something quite thrilling about knowing you'd have to check payroll every month to see if you can make payments or people issues, or it's like, hey, I can just do the stuff I enjoy doing and let someone else do all that stuff. No, I mean, we could hold a separate podcast on that. But just, but we're not going to do it now. But you're back in London for Interconnect, 16th of September. What should people, what do they need to know from you to encourage them to turn up for that?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's going to be a little different about this Interconnect is we actually have a proper contractor offering. So we acquired Prime Ecosystems, now Contractor Workspace. And so the content will be divided among underwriting, cat risk, claims from the carrier side, and also the contractor side, which I think it's part of the secret sauce that we have in the United States and the kind of the ability to bring carriers and the supply chain together in a really unique way, where both companies are figuring out how to improve their bottom lines simultaneously, which is a really great spot we like to sit in. And so we're really excited to be able to actually have a proper offering for the really important contractors in the space that need to run, profitable businesses as well.
And I'm going to have to give a call out to Yana, who organizes that. I mean, I don't think she's got any help doing it apart from her team, and we know how hard it is to run conferences, does an incredible job, and I'm still trying to get her on the podcast at some point. The last two I've been to have just been fantastic, really good. So Garret, before I let you go, is there anything else we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
Yeah, look, I think we've covered a lot, to be honest, but a little bit more on Interconnect. I'm excited because I think there's going to be a lot of really cool product revelations that are coming. I'm not going to spoil the surprises. There's been a lot of work done specific to the UK workspace, and so we're going to be excited for people to learn about that. And again, I do think a big part of the role that we're trying to play is actually bringing these constituents together, not pitting them against each other. And so there's going to be the ability to collaborate and network together to solve some of the really difficult problems our industry is facing.
I suspect, Garret, if your career hadn't taken you in the direction it did with insurance, you would have ended up in the entertainment business or something similar, because I've just seen how much you enjoy doing this, how much incredible work you and the team do for building it. So I know there'll be a lot more. So I'm careful I'm going to say this, but nothing else, people are going to be entertained by what they see.
We put a lot of time and effort. We know people are going to take a whole day out of their day in London, and in the US, it's 3 days. So we want people to not just come and get a boring readout. That we want them to not be entertained, but we want to create the environment for them to really have their brains lit on fire on how they can make these changes. And that isn't just by presenting like a PowerPoint deck. That's actually creating a vibe that gets people into that space. And some of the most like satisfying things is when I see a carrier and a contractor like huddled together in a corner, and they're kind of like, I don't want to say they're fighting it out, but they're like both like really passionate about how they get to a better place. And that's the type of environment we want to create.
Yeah. No, I mean, we'll just leave it with that final comment, which is the tension also of running these conferences is how much do you want people to watch you on stage versus how much do you want to have them time to go and catch up with all the other people there. But no, well done. I'm looking forward to that again. And, congratulations on everything you've done. And, I'm glad, although your house is still not, you sound like you've even started work on it, at least your family's safe, and, some lessons from that and lessons for your boys as well. That's something obviously they'll never forget.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if you've made it this far, then I'm pretty sure you found that as interesting as I did. The InsTech podcast comes out every Sunday morning, where we spotlight the latest news, leading voices, and freshest updates across insurance that you need to know about. If you would like to take part in these conversations, head to www.instech.co to find out how you can join our network and be a part of the insurance intelligence for the curious.